and welcome to the Dogtor Bros, where we have an honest discussion around vet life in and out of the clinic. My name is Adam, and I am your doc of the day. And as always, I'm joined by some of my closest friends from vet school.
Hey, this is Chris. I'm a GP in North Carolina.
Hey, this is Jeff. I'm a veterinary dermatologist in Louisville, Kentucky.
And again, this is Adam. I am a relief veterinarian in Louisville, Kentucky. And on today's episode, we're going to be diving in, talking a little bit about diets and what diets are recommended for most patients or the majority of patients. But before we get started, we're going to start with a fun opening question. So where is the last place that you were recognized as a veterinarian?
This is Jeff. We were joking about this before recording. The last place I got recognized, I was in the boarding process on a plane, and I was wearing a jacket that, this will make sense for this episode. I was wearing a jacket that had a Purina logo on it, and I just remember not feeling very good and getting in a row. It was like one of those first times where you got nobody else in your row, and it was really exciting. And the stewardess comes up and says, "Hey, can I ask you a question?" And I was like, "Yeah." "Hey, are you a veterinarian?" And then proceeds to tell me about the story and life of her dog and asked me medical questions, and I was trapped.
Classic.
Nothing I could do.
This is Chris. The last time that I can remember was at Publix, just doing my grocery shopping. It wasn't anything like JT's. It was a client. So we just said hi, and that was about the end of it.
Celeb status. No pictures.
This is Adam, and typically when I've run into situations like that, it's, at the dentist or getting my hair cut, and they're just like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "I'm a veterinarian." And then they kind of go into the spiel about all their pets. There was one time that I can remember that I did run into a client at church. I was actually at a different church than I usually go to, and I ran into them, but they were he was actually a really, really nice client, really good client. And I had recently seen his dog, who this was several years ago, and she was fairly ill. So we had like a quick little, follow up with how's she doing, and maybe you can try these added things and whatnot. And it was a nice interaction. But yeah, that's the last time I saw an actual client in the wild, I guess you'd say.
In the wild.
So starting in with today's topic, again, we're going to be talking a little bit just about diets. And I know there's a lot of prescription diets, specialty diets out there that will prescribe for certain conditions and things based on the individual pet and what's going on with them. But this is more so just talking about run-of-the-mill, middle-aged, normal, healthy patient. What they should be feeding, and some of the good things we should be doing, some of the things we hear about that are maybe trendy, and whether or not they are good. And so we're just going to kind of go over a few of these things. So to get things started, what do you guys recommend to pet owners? Again, just a typical run-of-the-mill healthy patient. When they ask, what should I be feeding my dog? What do you tell them?
This is Chris. So pretty much when asked that, or get a new puppy and they ask what food they should feed, I typically say pick one of the big three for me, which is Purina, Hills, or Royal Canin. I said typically you can't go wrong with any of their foods, and then just stick with one of those. And that's been pretty much my recommendation for a pretty long time.
This is Jeff, and I'll say, number one disclaimer, if you happen to be a vet owner, ask your vet specifically what's good for your vet. So all of this is general advice, not specifically for individual pets. But I usually stick with those big three too, the Purina, Hills, and Royal Canin in particular, because they have what's called an AAFCO statement, AAFCO, which you can Google. And you want to look for an approval of that statement. Essentially, it's an organization that is involved with nutritional, requirements for our pets for what should be considered complete and balanced. And ideally, if they've had feeding trials on those foods, that would be the best because it means they've taken the actual diet, fed them to animals, and seen how they work. And I believe all three of those big brands do have those statements, which is nice.
Yeah, and that's typically what I tell people as well. Those are the three brands that I recommend the most. A well-balanced adult, if they're, in the adult range. Adult, typically dry food is what I recommend for most. Another question that I personally get a lot from clients. Everybody is really big on how much. Like, how much food do I give? How much do I feed them? How often do I need to feed them? Once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day? What do you guys typically go through and tell people? And like Jeff said, a lot of this is going to be patient specific. We're not trying to generalize here, but again, just kind of big picture. What do you guys typically tell people in terms of how much to feed and how often to feed?
This is Jeff. I just say feed based off of the bag label. if it's AFCO approved, then I'm perfectly fine with it. I usually just stick with the classic 2-day feedings if they have no other health problems, no other reasons to need a specific food. I don't really like one-time feeding a day because I think there's not correlation or causation, but I remember in vet school how large breed dogs can be more subjected to flipping their stomachs eating one time a day. And I don't think that's like proven by any means, but if you can avoid it, then why not? And also, like, maybe I'm just humanizing our patients, but like, I don't want to eat once a day. I'd be starving. So I feel like twice a day is probably fine. If you want to feed more than that, then, by all means, go for it, or get an automatic feeder or whatever you like.
This is Chris. I'm pretty much in the same boat as JT. They just do whatever the bag says. I usually say just if there's a range on there and we tell them their dog's weight, I say try to send to the lower end of the range just because the ranges can vary and they'll sometimes overfeed. But overall, I just say follow the bag, and that's worked for the most part.
Yeah, and same here. I'll typically tell people kind of go by the bag. I kind of pitch it to people as, all these foods have different caloric intakes. So, I mean, it's kind of a stretch, but, you could even equate like one food as a salad and another food as a cheeseburger. Like, it's going to be really different, like how much you're taking in, based on calorie dense content. Based on how much you feed. So it varies a lot. So that's why I tell people, again, at least as a starting point, going by what that bag says, and then we can adjust up or down if need be.
And I like what you said, Chris, about the going towards a lower end of a range, if there is a range on the bag, because if it says your large breed dog needs to have 4 cups to 5 cups a day or whatever, going on the lower end is not only a good idea, but also gives you a place to start. And I think I used to recommend when I was doing more calculating of specific caloric needs in general practice, but like 90%, y'all correct me, 90% of the food they eat per day can be the kibble, and ideally no more than 10% of treats. Is that still the case? Something like that?
That sounds right.
We'll take it. I know it's not. I feel like it's not a bad idea, but I'm like, I don't know if that's the exact up-to-date thing.
Yeah, and that definitely, going on the lower end of that range definitely makes some wiggle room. And I know one thing I've found is people love giving their dog treats. They love it, and so, which is good. I mean, let's keep them happy, reward them, and we want them to be happy as well. So yeah. Making a little wiggle room there. As far as frequency of feeding, yeah, I'm with you, Jeff. I wouldn't want to eat once a day. So I usually recommend at least twice a day. I have even had instances before where dogs come in for like intermittent vomiting, and we get to talking a little bit. And it turns out they only feed the dog once a day. And it's like, well, maybe we try doing like a twice daily feeding. And something as simple as that corrects that vomiting. It's just the stomach set empty for so long that gastric acid builds up and the dog gets a little gastritis. And so not much medical interventions needed, just taking that meal, splitting it in half and feeding it twice daily just to keep something on the stomach. I've even had them break it up before into 4 or 5 smaller meals throughout the day, and that's been effective as well. So yeah, I typically, if anything, recommend more frequent feedings. Obviously, there's limiting factors in that, with your own time management, but typically twice daily. If it's a really small dog, maybe 3 times a day. But run of the mill adult dog twice daily, I think is reasonable. Another question that I get hit with a lot, even with patients being on those 3 main brands, Hill Science Diet, Royal Canin, Purina Pro Plan, people are always looking to provide the best nutrients for their dogs. And a lot of my clients are doing additional research and seeing what else they may need. And, sometimes I'll get asked, are there any additional supplementations that my dog needs? Any other vitamins that they may need or minerals? What do you guys typically say in those types of situations?
No. No, this is just because the diets that we like are, again, I'm not that's solely attached to the big 3, but if it's AAFCO approved, then it should be complete and balanced. That organization is not the end all be all, but complete and balanced means the food that you're feeding based off of that bag should be all they need. Unless they have other health problems, which consult your vet, they probably don't need extra. But there is a lot of misinformation out there, I think, that kind of pushes it, and there's very little regulation in regards to supplements. So I just say, no, they probably don't need it. But, and in my case, I get lots of, let's say, dry skin. Sure, every now and then I will specifically prescribe something for that issue.
This is Chris. I'm pretty much in the same boat with JT. The only supplement that I ever recommend is joint supplements. It's usually for arthritic dogs because they have a condition. So we're treating that. And then omega-3 fatty acids. Those are probably the only supplements that I actively go and say, hey, you should be on those.
Yeah, Chris, you stole the 2 right out from under me. The 2 supplements I typically ever recommend are joint supplements or omega-3 fatty acids for a variety of reasons. One being kidney failure, which we learned from Brandon in a previous episode. Go back and listen to it if you haven't heard it. But yeah, those are really the only 2 that I ever recommend. That's not for all patients. Those are, again, for kind of more medical cases that we're trying to manage as well.
And I guess probiotics are also another supplement. So like Fortiflora, anything like that. But again, that's usually for GI upset or some GI issue going on. Mm-hmm. Or immune issue, now that I'm learning. So yeah. Mm-hmm. Fortiflora is good for a lot of things.
Yeah, for sure. And like I was talking about earlier with some dogs that I've seen with gastritis and we split up feedings, I've also had success with just adding in something as simple as Fortiflora or a probiotic. And that's helped with gastritis and colitis in separate instances there with that.
And one note that I just want to plug, since we've mentioned supplements a couple of times, is they should really be specifically recommended by your vet, because not every over-the-counter one is going to be high enough in concentration to have a therapeutic dose. There are some brands I like specifically for my omega fatty acids, and it's so far more than you think it is. Like, most people will just get something off of the shelf that says the word probiotic or the word omega fatty acid on it and just give it because they're trying to help. And I really like when my owners will actually bring them in to me. So I even had some this week where they showed me products that had vitamin E, omega fatty acids, and a couple other things that are helpful for the skin in particular, but the doses were not high enough. And I just told them that. I was like, based on what you're bringing in your pet today, they probably don't need this product. But if you do just want to try it out, I think we will need to switch it to something different. And most supplements I found and in the research, they take a couple of months to start working. I think the shortest I've heard of is probably Fortiflora, which they like you to give. I anecdotally feel like it works even faster, but I believe you need to give it for at least a month in some cases to start seeing specific improvement. So a lot of those products, even omega fatty acids, I usually tell them 2 to 3 months. So you won't see overnight results with them anyway. And again, a run-of-the-mill healthy dog or cat shouldn't really need any supplements.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I tell people too. A lot of those brands that we recommend are very well balanced. I know people are trying to do what's best for their pet, make sure they're covering all their bases, but more often than not, if your dog is otherwise or cat is otherwise healthy, additional supplementation is not needed. It's all right there in their well balanced diet. And again, kind of like Jeff said, it's really hard for us to recommend, in most cases, any supplementation over the counter that you find on Amazon or in the store or anywhere else. It's hard for us to kind of speak to those without seeing what's in them. And even then, it's tough to know how those are made and what kind of process they go through in making that. So it's tough for us to speak to those specific supplementations as well. So getting towards the end, one other thing I wanted to talk about is some of the trends that you've heard in vet medicine in terms of diets. We can kind of go through just a couple of these and kind of get your opinions on them. So for starters, what do you guys feel, or what have you heard, or what are your opinions on at-home diets?
This is Jeff. My opinions are, if you're feeding it, there has to be a good medical reason. I do understand that this is a potentially controversial area where if you are specifically trying to avoid processed food, okay, there's not a lot of research or information out showing specific harm from many of those foods. In fact, on the contrary, there's a lot of research. So disclaimer, my research was also in nutrition, and I do have a relationship with Purina. If you've listened to this podcast for any period of time, you know that Chris and I were student reps for Purina, so that we do have that relationship. But also, along with that came with us actually getting to spend some time with the literal, I don't know if you remember, Chris, was it like biochemists or something that actually we had presentations at their headquarters?
Yeah.
We've heard the science behind it. So this is not a blind biased opinion. It's like the diets that I recommend and the food that I like comes from heavy research. And I, in particular, have read so much information on pet nutrition. And again, that was my research in my residency. So when we're recommending these different diets, it's for a reason. So home cooked in particular, I like to ask my clients, what is their goal with it? And sometimes I will use a home cooked one if I have a client that wants to avoid processed food for ruling out food allergy, but it'll be for a brief period of time very specifically. Often it is not complete and balanced, which is safe for a dog or cat that is otherwise healthy for a period of 8 weeks. And then after that, I want them back on a complete and balanced diet. And we know for that period of time, I'm just ruling something out for a medical reason. Most of the time to see if they're food allergic and to make them less itchy, reduce their symptoms, etc. Beyond that, for me, if my client wants to stay on home cooked, I refer them to a nutritionist.
This is Chris. I'm pretty much in the same boat. A lot of people ask me recommendations on how to do home cooked meals, and I usually tell them I'm not the right person for that. We need to send you to a nutritionist, someone who has more training in home cooked diets. When they don't want to do that, I say an easy kind of way to cheat is to put in kibble, because then you'll get some of the nutrients that you're missing out. I said a lot of the times you're missing out on all of the balanced nutrients because just like with people, you're probably not cooking as well of a balanced meal as you should for your dog. You're giving it 3 things and it needs more than just those 3 ingredients. So typically I'll say add in some kibble if you want to cheat but still want to do the home cooked diet. But I'm more of a just talk nutritionist, but I still prefer kibble dog food over home cooked diets.
Yeah, and I'll also add again, the diets are safe. I've researched and we've learned a lot about like this quote unquote scary sounding things in the food are not generally scary. They're not harmful. If you've seen recalls on things, we want that. That means that those pet companies are monitoring their food for harmful things and removing them off market for you. And also, even though we specifically, Chris and I both have some sort of a relationship with a pet food company and we like them, they have good research behind them, but you can go to a regular veterinarian if they have interest in nutrition, even if they're not like a boarded specialist. I just am not that. And even though I love nutrition, but I haven't found a passion for like calculating out calories and different nutrients. And there are some reputable websites, but I would say go through your vet specifically. So if you're a vet out there or a vet professional who has interest in it, you can make that your thing. It's just not our thing, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I'm in the same boat as you guys. Anytime anybody asks me about an at-home diet, I kind of refer back to a CE that I did a couple years ago that talked about at-home diets. And the two things that stood out to me most from that was one that I think it said 90% of the home diets that you see online, even on reputable sites, are not well balanced. And it also said that even small substitutions can make a big difference. So even something as simple as substituting olive oil for vegetable oil can throw it out of balance. So it may seem simple in your mind of, oh, I have this replacer instead, but it may be throwing the whole meal out of whack and making it unbalanced. So I kind of refer to those 2 points when I'm talking about home cooked diets. I'm not 100% against them if clients are really for them. But again, I strongly recommend consulting with a veterinary nutritionist who will go through and come up with a plan for them of what they need to be a well-balanced diet. So that's my biggest takeaway from that. So the last two, I think we can probably run through pretty quick. I feel like we're going to have some similar opinions on these. We'll start with raw diets.
Pass.
I'll hit it. This is Jeff. I mean, I will be brief and say, again, most of them just aren't medically necessary. If you look at the nutrition volumes and the literature behind it, they don't, based on the research, they're typically not seen to be more beneficial. And a lot of the journals out there, if they show some correlation with improvement, it's not exact with causation. And unfortunately, there's a lot of flaws in some of the research. So I would just say, unless you are going through your vet, perhaps a veterinary nutritionist, sound like a broken record. And that's just, I don't judge anybody who wants to use one offhandedly, but I try to be curious about why. And if it's about the processing and you just feel very strongly that you want to do it, sure. I will say, last thing is like some pet parents will hear stories about improvement of diets. And if you go online, you'll see improvement about anything on any food probably. But sometimes if you are inadvertently doing a diet trial, like maybe you're starting a raw diet, but your pet was actually allergic to chicken and poultry, you accidentally put them on a beef-based diet as an example, and it just happens to be raw, but probably it's the beef component that actually helped us out because we have eliminated part of the problem, but it probably is not because it's raw.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think that the risk certainly outweighed the potential pros.
Say the risks
of that. I mean, obviously infection is a big one. Foodborne illness is real. I don't want it as well. That's why I don't eat raw meat. Again, kind of like we said earlier, kind of humanizing our patients a little bit. I mean, sometimes that's okay in instances like this. Again, I wouldn't want to eat raw meat. I cook all my meat. So I want the same for my pet.
And this is Chris. And again, it's not a I get where it's coming from. It's caring for the pets and wanting to do what's right for them and make sure, hey, I want to do less processed food, which I'm all for that. But I would say I'd rather do a home cooked food than raw food, just from the inherent risks that we can get just handling raw food. I mean, even like you said, people, you're kind of humanizing that as well. I get the argument a lot is, oh, they're related to or descendants of the wolf. And I kind of go with, we're pretty far from the wolf now when it comes to that. So as much as we have a ferocious Labradoodle coming at us, I'm not pretty sure they're not going to be out there hunting like a wolf is, with the same type of metabolism and way they process foods there. So I'm not a big fan of raw diets. I rather do home cooked diets over raw diets, but I understand where it's coming from.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I don't think there's any ill intent there. When people want to put their pet on a raw diet, I think they're really trying to do what's best for them. But again, our goal is just to kind of help educate, and kind of steer people in the right direction.
Yeah, and I was just going to add to that. I think we kind of touched on it, but there is inherent concern about health risk because there has been some information from reputable sources showing that households that do have raw diets, it makes it a little bit more concerning for us because salmonella, listeria, all those foodborne illnesses are out there if you're not doing really considerable extra sanitation. So they can be done well and done right, ideally with a veterinary nutritionist, somebody who knows how to get you to balance it appropriately. But at the end of the day, for most patients, it's probably not a necessary thing. But you can do it and do it right, because we know you're not doing it from a place of, I want to harm your dog, obviously. You're just trying to help them, and we understand that.
Yeah, when in doubt, talk to a nutritionist. That's,
Ping!
that's bottom line. One takeaway from this episode. That's it. All right, last one, and I think we can breeze through this pretty quick. We've talked on this one on a previous episode, but doesn't hurt to touch on it again. Grain-free diets.
This is Chris. They were kind of the trend when we first came out of vet school, kind of graduated from vet school. They've kind of died off now. There's been several issues with multiple dog foods being linked to DCM, not linked. They're still trying to figure out the correlation with it. There's still a lot of studies going on. I don't recommend it. There's not anything that I would say I'm worried about grain-free or grained foods unless there's something specific that they've been like diagnosed with an issue. Overall, I say just do a well-balanced food.
And this is Jeff. I'll say, agree with all that. The only way to 100% determine, because some of the main concerns is, are they allergic to something in the grain? I can tell you from a specialist standpoint, I think it's like, I don't know the exact numbers, it's abysmally small for the amount of patients that have a genuine health-related adverse reaction to grain, like an actual allergy to grain. It's just extremely unlikely. Like I want to say less than 5%, but I'm not positive, so nobody quote me. But it's just it's so small, it's not worth it. But the only way to prove that is prescription diet trial through your veterinarian for a minimum of 8 weeks, and then trying out individual ingredients to see if they actually have an issue with it, and seeing those symptoms like itching more or GI signs return, which most people don't want to do all of that. And if they're otherwise healthy, it's probably not necessary.
Yes. Agreed with all of that. Really nothing to add. And again, we've covered a lot of information on diets today. Again, the goal of this episode was just to give some broad overviews of our opinions on different diets, different trends in diets, our opinion on supplementation. And again, like Jeff said towards the beginning of this episode, at the end of the day, what's best for your dog is best decided by you and your veterinarian. So again, this is just general knowledge. But again, to come up with that best game plan, schedule an appointment with your vet and talk to them about what's best for you and for them. So just to round things out with our outro question, our fun little outro question, we'll keep it food related since this whole episode was about food. What is your favorite dish to make?
This is Chris. Adam already knows my answer. It's typically I like making a skirt steak. We'll make that and either make it into tacos or make them into kind of a bowl with rice, black beans, some guac, and either veggies or like the other night we made it with like fried plantains. But yeah, skirt steak.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I can attest to the fact that Chris makes a mean skirt steak. His skirt steak tacos that we had when I went to visit him were delicious. So
thanks, Jeff. I think thanks.
Shameless plug.
I've heard the story so
Chris's
many times. I feel
truck.
like I've had the steak. Oh God. Okay, my favorite thing to make is probably baked ziti. It's just so easy.
That's
like
yummy.
the baked ziti. Yeah. I think I made it for y'all before, probably. The ziti, which I usually use rigatoni, tomato sauce, spinach, crispy sausage, ricotta, and then like mozzarella. You mix that all together, put some mozzarella or Italian mix on the top and bake it. So chef's kiss.
Ooh, that sounds so good.
So easy.
So good. I am not a cook. I can
You made
grill.
me steak once.
Yeah, I did.
Did you grill it?
I did grill it. I tried to make Chris's tacos, and they were okay.
They're okay.
But I can grill a little. On top of that, I can make a cheeseburger casserole that is okay.
I'm dead. Don't want to get crazy.
But yeah, I don't get too adventurous in the kitchen. I'm not. Actually, that's my problem. I think I get too adventurous, and I was like, I don't need those recipes. I just sprinkle a little more, and it doesn't always turn out according to plan. So,
Well, so what you're saying is Hamburger Helper is still going to be in business.
Hamburger Helper is my best friend. Yes.
Thank you once again for joining us on the Dogtor Bros.
If you would like to support us, please share this episode with others who may be interested in today's topic, and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Would you like to influence our next episode? We love hearing your opinions and thoughts. Your comments may be our next topic.
Please leave us suggestions via email at thedoctorbros@gmail.com, DM us at thedoctorbros on Instagram, or leave us comments on our posts. Again, this is Brandon. You can reach me at Dr. Mason IM on Instagram.
And this is Chris, and you can reach me on Instagram at dr.chrishernandez.
And this is Jeff. You can find me on TikTok or Instagram at DermDrJeff, DermDogtorJeff.
And this is Adam. You can reach me on Instagram at Dr. Adam DVM. That's DRADAMDVM.